Story 1. The moving truck next door. So I want to start by saying that I'm not someone who gets creeped out easily. I grew up in a pretty rough part of the city. I've lived alone since I was 19, and I've always been the person in my friend group who rolls their eyes at I had a weird feeling stories. I say that because what I'm about to tell you genuinely shifted something in me, and I've been trying to figure out how to write it down for about 8 months now. This happened in late October 2 years ago. I was renting the left half of a duplex on Carmel Street, a quiet, older neighborhood, mostly retirees and young families, the kind of street where people actually wave at each other. My next door neighbor, a retired school teacher named Mrs. Polanski, had moved to assisted living sometime in early September, and her side of the duplex had been sitting empty for almost 6 weeks. I remember it was a Thursday. I know because I'd just gotten home from my shift at 11:22 p.m. I was working at a packaging facility at the time. Thursday nights were always the longest, and I'd stopped to grab a box of cereal and some milk from the 24-hour place on Route 9. I pulled into my driveway and noticed a large moving truck parked in front of Mrs. Polanski's entrance. White truck, no company logo on the side, just plain white. I didn't think much of it. New neighbors, finally. I actually remember feeling relieved because 6 weeks of that side being empty had made the whole building feel kinda hollow at night. I grabbed my grocery bag, went inside, fed my cat, a fat orange tabby named Gerald, and went to bed. Here's where it starts to get uncomfortable. I woke up at 3:07 a.m. to Gerald standing on my chest, staring at the wall that separates my unit from the other side. He wasn't making a sound. He was just staring. Gerald is not a subtle cat. He yells at me for breakfast at 6 a.m. like he's announcing a fire. Seeing him completely silent and locked onto that wall was just off. I lay there for a second and then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate ones, moving from what I estimated was the kitchen area on the other side, down the hallway, then stopping, then going back, then stopping again, just back and forth, back and forth. I told myself it was the new tenants moving furniture around. People do weird things when they're unpacking. I've reorganized a kitchen at 2 a.m. before. I put Gerald on the bed, rolled over, and tried to go back to sleep, but then I heard something that I genuinely cannot explain away. A voice. Low, not quite whispering, but not full volume either. And it wasn't a conversation. It was one voice repeating something. I couldn't make out the words through the wall, but the rhythm of it was strange, almost like someone reading from a list. Same cadence, over and over, short pause, then again. I don't know why, but I got up. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just walked to my kitchen, which shares a wall with Mrs. Polanski's kitchen, and I stood there in the dark, in my socks out listening. Gerald followed me and sat on the floor next to the fridge. The voice stopped, and then, very clearly, I heard a single knock on the shared wall. Not aggressive, just one knock, like someone letting you know they're aware you're there. I did not knock back. I went and sat on my couch with every light in my apartment on and did not move until 6:30 in the morning. The next day, I called my landlord to ask about the new tenants. He told me, and I remember this clearly because I made him repeat it, that he had not rented out Mrs. Polanski's unit yet. He said it was still being deep cleaned and wouldn't be listed until mid-November. He asked me why, and I told him about the moving truck. He went quiet for a second and then said he'd send someone to check the locks, turns out the rear basement entry. A door that connects both units to a shared utility space had been opened from the inside, not forced, open, which meant someone had gotten in through Mrs. Polanski's side at some point during those 6 weeks and had been using that basement access. The police came, walked through, found some food wrappers and a flattened piece of cardboard in the utility room that looked like it had been slept on. They said it was likely someone who had figured out the vacancy and used it as a temporary shelter. They found no one. I moved out the following month. I think about that knock a lot. Whoever was on the other side of that wall heard me get up, walk to the kitchen, and stand there. They knew exactly where I was standing, and they just let me know. That's the part I keep coming back to. They could have stayed quiet. I probably would have gone back to bed. They chose not to.
Story 2. My study group had one extra member. I'm a pretty organized person. Always have been. Color-coded notes, shared Google Docs, the whole thing. So when I say that I noticed something was off because of a scheduling spreadsheet, I need you to understand that I'm the kind of person who would notice that. This isn't a ghost story. I want to be upfront about that. This is just a story about a person who was somewhere they absolutely should not have been and how long it took me to figure it out. This was my second year of college. I was studying environmental science at a mid-sized state university. Nothing fancy, commuter-heavy campus, the kind of place where half the student body has a part-time job and nobody really hangs around longer than they have to. I had a study group for a statistics course that met every Tuesday and Thursday evening in one of the group rooms at the back of the main library. There were 4 of us, me, my roommate Danny, a guy named Theo, who always brought those big gas station energy drinks, and a girl named Priya, who was honestly the only reason any of us understood the coursework. We'd been meeting for about 6 weeks when I first noticed him. He was just there one Thursday, sitting at the far end of our table when I arrived at 6:45 p.m. Danny and Theo were already there, and I just assumed he was a friend of one of theirs. He had a laptop open, a notebook, a pencil case. He looked exactly like a student. Maybe 22, 23, a little older than us, but not obviously so. He didn't introduce himself and nobody introduced him to me, so I just sat down and we got started. He didn't participate much. Asked one question about confidence intervals that was actually pretty relevant, and I remember Priya answered it, and he nodded and wrote something down. That was basically it. I didn't think about him again until the following Tuesday when he was there again, already seated when I arrived at 6:51 p.m. this time. Same spot. Laptop, notebook, pencil case. I leaned over to Danny before we sat down and quietly asked who he was. She looked at me and said, "I thought he was your friend." We both looked at Theo. Theo shrugged and said he'd assumed the guy was in our class. None of us knew him. Now here's the thing. The room we used was a reservable group study room. It wasn't a public open table. I had it booked under my student ID every Tuesday and Thursday from 6:45 to 9 p.m. So this person hadn't just wandered in and sat nearby. He was sitting at our reserve table. Twice I didn't say anything to him that night. I know that sounds like a bad decision, and looking back it probably was, but in the moment it felt rude and confrontational, and I genuinely wasn't sure if maybe he had some reason to be there that I'd forgotten about. I just watched him. He took notes. He looked at his laptop. Once he went to the bathroom for about 4 minutes and came back. Completely normal. After the session ended, and he packed up and left, I went to the library front desk and asked if someone else had also reserved that room. The desk attendant checked and said no. Only my reservation, all semester. I filed a report with campus security that night. I want to be honest, they were not particularly alarmed. They said it was probably just a student who saw an open room and used it, that it happened sometimes, and that I should just ask him to leave if it happened again. It happened again the following Thursday. He sat down at 6:40 p.m., 5 minutes before I even arrived. I know because Theo texted me saying, "Your friend is here already," as a joke. When I walked in, I looked directly at him and said that this was a reserved room and asked if I could help him. He looked up at me, completely calm, and said he was just studying and that he'd be quiet. Like that was a normal response. Like we'd asked him to be quiet and not who he was or why he kept coming back. Theo asked him his name. He said Marcus. He did not offer a last name. He did not offer what class he was studying for or what department he was in. He just said Marcus and looked back at his laptop. We moved our session to Danny's apartment that night, and I sent a formal written complaint to the Dean of Students' office with dates, times, and a physical description. I never saw him again after that. Campus security said they couldn't locate anyone matching the description enrolled under that name in the relevant departments, but that the campus was large and commuter-heavy, and record matching wasn't always clean. They said it was likely resolved. I didn't find that particularly comforting. What I keep thinking about is the pencil case. Same one every time. Organized. Like he had a routine. Like Tuesday and Thursday evenings in that room was just part of his week. He knew our schedule before some of us did.
Story 3. The trail camera on our property, I'll be honest with you. The trail camera was my dad's idea. He'd been talking about setting one up for almost 2 years before he actually did it. We have about 11 acres of rural property in eastern Tennessee, mostly wooded, with a creek that runs along the back edge. My parents bought it in the late 90s and built a single-story house on the front clearing. The rest of it, the woods and the creek and the overgrown trail that cuts through the middle, we mostly just left alone. Deer come through regularly. We'd seen turkey, once a black bear about 40 yards from the back porch. That was the whole reason for the camera. My dad wanted to document the wildlife. Completely normal, completely wholesome reason. He zip-tied it to a white oak about 60 feet into the tree line, angled toward the trail, roughly 200 feet behind the house. This was early March. The camera was a Bushnell core model, motion activated, shot both stills and short video clips. He checked it every Sunday morning with his coffee. It became a little ritual for him. He'd come inside with the SD card, load it up on the laptop at the kitchen table, and narrate whatever had walked past that week. It was genuinely nice. This went on for about 7 weeks without anything unusual. The first odd image came on a Sunday in late April. My dad didn't say anything about it right away, which I think is important context. He saw it, and he didn't come get me or my mom. He just sat with it for a while. I only found out because I walked into the kitchen at 9:14 a.m., and he was still at the laptop, which was unusual because he was normally done within 20 minutes. I asked him what he was looking at, and he tilted the screen toward me. The image was time-stamped 2:38 a.m. on a Wednesday. The camera's night vision gave everything that familiar green-gray tone. The trail was visible, the tree trunks on either side, the creek bank faintly in the background, and on the left edge of the frame, partially cut off, was a person. They were standing completely still, facing the camera, not facing the house. Facing the camera specifically, which was mounted at about chest height on the tree, which means they had to have known it was there. You don't accidentally face a small camera bolted to a tree trunk in the dark unless you've seen it before or you're looking for it. The image was a still, not a clip, so there was no before or after, just that one frame. Just a person standing at the edge of the trail at 2:38 in the morning, looking directly into the lens. We couldn't make out a face clearly. Dark jacket or hoodie, hands not visible, no obvious bag or equipment. Just standing there. My dad scrolled through the rest of that week's captures. Deer on Monday, nothing Tuesday, the person Wednesday, a raccoon Friday, like it was just another entry in the wildlife log. He called the county sheriff's office that afternoon. A deputy came out, walked the tree line, found nothing notable. No campsite, no trash, no obvious signs that anyone had been spending time back there. The deputy said it was probably a hunter cutting through or someone from a neighboring property, and that without clearer identifying features, there wasn't much to act on. He suggested we post no trespassing signs along the property edge, which we did that same week. My dad moved the camera, repositioned it further back, angled differently, higher up on the tree so it wasn't at chest height anymore. 2 Sundays later, he came and got me before he even poured his coffee. There were 3 new images from that week, all from the same night, a Tuesday, between 1:52 a.m. and 2:11 a.m. The first showed the empty trail. The second, taken 4 minutes later, showed a figure moving through the frame maybe 30 feet from the camera, walking slowly, not rushing. The third image, taken 7 minutes after that, showed the trail empty again, but the camera had been moved, repositioned, mounted higher and at a different angle than before, and whatever was out there had found it again. My dad bought 2 more cameras that week and set up a basic alert system that pinged his phone when motion triggered after midnight. He also started leaving the back porch light on all night, which he'd never done before. My mom wanted to call the sheriff again, but my dad said he wanted more documentation first. He wanted to be taken seriously. Over the next 3 weeks, the cameras captured the same figure on 4 separate occasions. Always late, always moving slowly, always in at least 1 frame per night, paused and oriented toward whichever camera was closest. We never identified who it was. We eventually got a property lawyer involved to formally document the trespassing and sent certified letters to every neighboring landowner. Nobody claimed to know anything. My parents still live there. The cameras are still up. My dad still checks them every Sunday morning, but he doesn't narrate anymore. He just goes quiet, looks through them, and closes the laptop.